Is there a John Luck Pickard here? Oh, yeah, there is. It's me. Anyway, hello. Welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion, continuing to count down my top 25 favorite episodes of Star Trek. We're up to my number lucky 13, which is the sixth season Next Generation episode, Tapestry. And of course, as always, here to break this episode down with me to regular but special guests, Darrin and Alyssa. Darrin, how are you going today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite episodes, so I'm kind of stoked to be able to talk about this one tonight.
Awesome. And Alyssa, how are you going tonight?
Good, I'm doing okay, even though I have no grumba. I talk, but I have no grumba. But no, other than that, I'm doing pretty good. Good to be
Right. Okay. So, Darrin kind of alluded to his thoughts on this episode, but let's start with overall thoughts on the episode. I don't know. I've heard that the comparison made before to "It's a Wonderful Life." I don't know if that. I never seen that movie. I don't really like those old timey Christmas movies, but but from what I heard about it, it seems kind of similar. But I still love it. Like I remember this and The Inner Light were two episodes that I showed a friend that had way back in the day who'd never seen Star Trek, and I'm like, and they're like, "Oh, was there? Can you show me a couple since you love Star Trek? What's the really good? Just show me one or two really good episodes." So I showed Inner Light and then this, and she loved them, thought they were great, and wasn't sure she'd get into Star Trek overall, but loved those two episodes. I think she also watched like a Deep Space Nine episode when I was watching it, and she's like, "No, I don't like this. It's bullshit." It was like one of the ones in the arc, so she had no idea what the hell was going on. But this one, I think, is is a good episode, standalone on its own, because it's got a good, nice theme of regrets, and I think it could apply to anyone. And I often apply this to my life, and I think, oh, I wish I would have done that differently. But then I think, well, maybe things wouldn't turn out that well. I also apply that to Star Trek because sometimes I wish that Nemesis and Enterprise didn't fail and they actually did something better and made a better movie and made a better show. But then maybe things would have played out differently. Maybe it wouldn't have been as good in the future. Maybe we wouldn't have Lord Dexter, stuff like that. So I think it's a very relatable, universal episode, and it's also a great character story for Picard. And I think to date, it is to date when this episode was released, it was the best use of Q. But then all good things will outdo that. But it remains one of the best uses of Q in the franchise. So yeah, love this episode. Alyssa, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same things that you said. I think that it has a really relevant and powerful message, and maybe one that not everyone thinks about all the time. That when we have regrets in our lives, or we did something stupid when we were younger, a lot of times that set us on the right path because you learn from those mistakes and you grow as a human being. And if you were to take those mistakes away, you're pulling on the strings of the tapestry and unraveling it, so to speak. So I thought this was a beautiful metaphor that they used, and I would just agree with you completely that this is a great Picard episode. This is a great Q episode. Um, yeah, and I just think that I love how they took this little throwaway scene from a season 2 episode. That which one was that? It wasn't a great episode. It was a side plot with Picard and Wesley going on a date.
Yes, it was a Samaritan Snare.
It was Samaritan Snare. Yeah, not. It's amazing how much mileage future Star Trek has gotten out of Samaritan Snare with lowered axle, having the pack lids in it. But yeah, just kind of this throwaway, forgettable scene that they took and made it as like a cornerstone of Picard's life, like a very important event in his life and make a whole episode around it. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I think it's one of the better written episodes, and it's in that season 6, which I think there's just a lot of really high quality episodes. Mark, I heard you talking about, I was watching your videos the other day where you were talking about the stretch of doom and Enterprise. I think
Yeah.
season 6 kind of has the opposite of that. I don't know if they're all in a row. I think Aquael is thrown in the middle of it, which is not the best, but all the, like, there's the stretch of all these great episodes, like Chain of Command is in there, and yeah, so this is part of that. But anyways, yeah, I just think the writing is amazing.
Yeah, I don't know a name for that one. It should be called The Stretch of Awesome, maybe.
I would go with Stretch of Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, there's so many really good episodes in this
Shipping
season.
the bottles in that is in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, is in
Face
there
of the
too.
Enemy.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, this is one of those, like I said, it's one of my favorite. It's really stuck with me in many senses. And one of it is because, yeah, it does come off of this little shuttlecraft story that just sort of like hits on a few points, and you start to see little connections with Wesley and Jean-Luc Picard, and his tough demeanor is starting to drop. And so it was kind of an interesting story, but that's season 2. And that had that had Pulaski in it, and the Packlets, which it's got its ups and downs. But that's why this was kind of a fun episode, I think, when it aired. That really kind of grabbed on, like, oh, we get to see this story, which is really cool. And yeah, I can see the comparisons to It's a Wonderful Life in that sense. I mean, it's not the same thing, but this does a lot about what your more recent favorite episode with Voyager was, I think, in the same way. It was something that feels like a standard Star Trekian type story, but it's greater than the sum of its parts. And I think it's got some amazing stuff. I think it's an interesting idea. It definitely has a nice shift of character with Q coming in. Now, his relationship with Picard really has changed. You really start to see him as I won't say guardian angel type kind of thing, but almost more of a comrade in a way, though, friends is kind of a little pushy thing to do with the two of them. But definitely the performances between Patrick Stewart and John Delancey, and the chemistry between them, I think, really pops this story up. I think it's satisfying that we're getting more into kind of the past and these stories of characters, which are really good. And I think on top of that, not only deals with, It's a Wonderful Life is, if I didn't exist, this is a lot more on the choices that make us. And I think the fact that it ends so beautifully on even a philosophical idea, when he's like, I had all these loose threads in my life, and when I pulled on them, I unraveled the tapestry of my life. It was just kind of a beautiful thing. And in fact, that line has stuck with me ever since I first saw it. Is that I think that's such a beautiful way to do it. And you also, again, this is even Picard opening up a little bit more. There's a great scene between Delancey and him where he's talking about the date that he's got coming up with Penny and what had happened and all these things. And he almost gets like he's chummy, like he's leaning forward and he's like, yeah, I had this thing happen and this so and on. It's like you start to see this kind of connection to him. And I think, again, all of these little bits, not only just being very well put together, and I think very cleanly told, but it's got all these extra little elements that I think add so much more depth to this episode. Also fun to know, directed by the same character, or by the same director who did the season 2 episode Samaritan Snare, Les Landau. So I kind of think that it's fun that he gets a chance to bring to life the story he had told in the Shuttlecraft several years before. So.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was the same director who did both episodes.
I wanted to add something I forgot to say because kind of Darrin reminded me. Darrin touched on it. This and All Good Things are the first 2 episodes where we finally really see Q as kind of a mentor figure for Picard, but he does it in kind of an antagonistic way. He kind of, like Riker says at the end of this episode, sounds like he put you through hell, but Picard's like, yeah, but he really taught me something. And so he does the same thing in All Good Things. And I really love that relationship between Q and Picard. And this is something, I'm sorry to bring this up, but the writers of Picard season 2 did not understand how this was supposed to work. They did not understand. They went a little too far. It was like, give me a hug. And it was like, no, that is not how this works at all.
God damn.
But yeah, I that's another thing that I really appreciate this episode for.
Picard season 2. but yeah, no, I mean, I agree, absolutely agree, and I think this episode and All Good Things are like the 2 best Q episodes because of that mentor relationship. Even though Q probably appears less in those 2 episodes than he does in other ones, it's, I think, better use of Q. But there was Cupid when he was trying to teach Picard a lesson, but that was like misguided and it was a stupid lesson anyway. So it's quite kind of different than this episode. I think, yeah, definitely much better in that regard. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to say hello to everyone in the chat. Jay came in 99, my favorite person apparently. Hello, good to see you. And Norman and Tyler and Brandon, I think, had to take off, but it was there for a bit. So Jay came in 99 was saying thoughts on this episode being in the top 25. I would not put it in my top 25, but I have no problem at all with it being in your top 25. It makes sense. It's a good episode. Well, why wouldn't you put it in your top 25? Damn it. No, just kidding.
Yeah. They came in I'm kidding.
Yeah. What did Norman say? This is a penance to a hug. Q is a domestic abuser. Damn it. Oh, that was the...
Yeah, because he starts off the season like, this is a penance, and he's all angry and give me a hug. You're like, yeah, that is like a domestic abuser. Good point, Norman.
But speaking of Picard season 2, I noticed watching this episode that Picard's father appears and he looks nothing like Guy Speltar.
Well, Picard's mother appeared in season 1 and looks nothing like the woman who played her either. So
yeah.
It was a hard couple years at the end. He really aged. You don't know, man. Yeah. It's like Obi-Wan between the series and when he shows up in A New Hope. You know, there's a couple of hard years.
And they kind of made it worse by having the Obi-Wan series because then there's even less time between that and A New Hope.
It's all right. In 20 years, the Jedi becomes an ancient religion. So, I mean, it just things move fast in the Star Wars universe. That's, you know.
All right. I'm going to try not to argue with Jay Came in 99 because we have other things to talk about. But I completely disagree with that, what you're saying. But
all right. So let's go ahead and get started jumping into the episode. So wanted to talk about the opening scene, Picard dies, which I think, again, I got to bring this up because anyone who saw this video I did a couple months ago where I count down my top 10 favorite soundtracks from each episode of Next Generation. This was in my top 10. I think it was number 7 or something. I think the music here is absolutely beautiful. When like Picard is, had died and he's walking through this white void and the music is soaring and he goes up and he sees this figure, touches his hand, and it's fucking cute. It's like, you're dead. And I was like, that was such a great, shocking way to start the episode. And then you have, Picard just being completely like, fuck you, Q. I don't want to be in the afterlife with you. He's like, if he, Q's like, you have any regrets? It's like, well, if I'm dead, my only regret is coming here and seeing you and having to be with you. But it's interesting because Q's kind of sort of leading him more and like asking questions he knows the answers to because, he brings up the artificial heart is why he died. and we see it play out where Picard is killed by the three Nausicaans, and he laughs. Something that they did mention in the Samaritan Snare story, he did mention that he laughed after he got stabbed. I think he said it like it tingled, like, or it just felt kind of tingly, and that what made him
A
laugh.
warm giddiness. I did watch that actually just before I
Yeah.
did the thing because I wanted to put them together and see what they matched up. But yeah, and again, that was one of the fun things that they did recreate. But yeah, he talks about he felt this warm giddiness, and in fact, I think I actually laughed.
Yeah, and it's So yeah, it was an interesting dynamic between Q and Picard because Q's acting like, oh, he's this, savior type, but Picard, doesn't really want to have anything to do with them. And oh yeah, and Q does this thing where he has like the voices of everyone saying, Captain, there's still people down there, and it's just like he says all the people that he killed through his actions or inactions. But why are they like acting like they're still in the moment of their deaths? I don't know. But anyway, that was kind of a creepy moment. But Q does have this kind of antagonistic attitude towards Picard, but sort of in a, I don't know, in a helping way, but Picard doesn't seem to want any help, and Q's kind of fishing for regrets. And once he shows him the Nausicaan thing, he's like, "Oh, is that a regret I hear?" And it goes into into the old time frame. But anyway, so just getting into your thoughts on his opening scene, how Q was. Darrin, we'll start with you on this one.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, perfect Q intro right there. It's like, welcome to the afterlife. You're dead. Just that great drop. But no, it's even like, and I'm God. She totally plays it all up, which is great. But you're right. It's one of those things that I obviously didn't really think about the first time I saw it, but certainly on our rewatch, it did pop up. It's like, okay, Q is, effectively a god. He's basically he is steering Picard through all of this, and he's using these voices and the great appearance of his father, I think, to kind of force him down to do this exercise for whatever reason that he wants. Because you can imagine, in the blink of an eye, he would have seen everything that actually happened and know the whole path and even the regrets that Jean-Luc has. So here he is at death's door, or dead. Again, they leave it kind of up in the air, and playing this Q game with him like he always does. But you have to imagine that he knows exactly what he's doing. He's there to have Picard do this, a trip back in memory lane. And I think it's great. He's sets him off. He makes him unbalanced. He uses the voices of the people that are dying to just stir that emotion. And he slams it down with his father. And that, again, the stuff between Patrick Stewart and John Delancey throughout this episode is awesome. But that is one of those just great moments where it's like Picard feels like he's not necessarily in control, but he's in control of himself in the situation until his dad shows up. And he's just like, make it stop. I want it done. Get rid of it. Almost like physically pushing back the image of his father, physically and mentally. And I think that's sort of the great thing that then goes into the regrets and things we haven't done, and brings up the heart and gets Picard to willingly do this little adventure that, of course, Q could always just make him do if he wanted to. But I think that's part of the thing. It's that mental exploration. And this starts, again, that kind of interesting tete-a-tete between Q and Picard, where it's not antagonistic. You're right. It is almost as a mentor at this point.
Yeah, I thought the scene was really great setup. Because this, like I said, this is the first time that we ever have that kind of mentor relationship. That really works. You did mention the Cupid, but yeah, that was stupid. That didn't really work. But Picard is very resistant to it at first. When Q says, "And I'm God," Picard is like, "You are not God." He's just like wants nothing to do with it, and he is pushing back at every turn, until, like Darren said, the father comes in and he's like, no, 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 make it stop. And then Q is able to kind of manipulate him to get him to where he wanted him to go. Like he wanted him all along to go down this road of regret, specifically from the artificial heart. That's always where he was leading him, and he was manipulating him a little bit, but for his own good, like for the good, for his betterment. It is interesting to see the shift in attitude from Picard from this scene at the beginning and until we get to that scene at the end when he's talking to Riker about it. That he kind of thinks like, oh well, actually, Q really helped me out here. I was really surprised. And of course, he would come in with that attitude based on his experience. And I think even, we as the audience watching this episode for the first time would kind of share Picard's skepticism because we're like, we have just seen Q just tormenting the crew. We haven't really seen Q be a true mentor yet. So I was probably skeptical too, watching along with Picard. I'm like, just leave him the fuck alone, Q. But in retrospect, it was a good setup for where this episode would go. So it's a really great opening scene.
Yeah, one thing I like is Q's response when Picard says, "You're not God." He's like, "Blasphemy! I should smite you," or something. Which I think is like that's the other good thing about Q's portrayal in this episode. He's funny, like he's not funny in all of his appearances, but he's funny. But it also portrays like it's very complex the way it portrays him, where he is like ultimately helping Picard, but he's doing it in a sort of kind of shitty way, I suppose. It was similar in All Good Things, where he puts Picard through hell, but ultimately it's for his own good. It's tough love, maybe is the right term for it. But yes,
All Good Things, though, he like puts the entire galaxy or universe in danger just to teach Picard a lesson. So that's a little weird, but yeah.
Oh, what's that there? You muted.
Oh, I was just saying he's feeling spicy that day. He just wanted to mix things up, add a little pizzazz to the story.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Q would have stepped in and stopped the universe from getting destroyed if Picard failed. I don't know. Maybe.
He could just go back and redo it. I mean, again, that's the power of Q.
All right, so cool. Let's move over to Picard going back in time. Now, I want to start with a question. So we get the whole thing with Patrick Stewart wearing the old-timey movies uniforms, and we're like, oh, he's meant to be a teenager, and everyone else sees him as a 19-year-old. So my question is, would it have been better if they actually cast a different actor rather than have Patrick Stewart? Because the reason why I was thinking about this, because I was watching this video about like the top 10 most cringy moments in Star Trek, and they mentioned Patrick Stewart kissing the actress who played Marta, who apparently was like 19 at the time, and Patrick Stewart was like in his 50s, and they were thinking, oh, this is one of the cringiest moments. So wouldn't it have been better if they just cast a different actor, and when we could see that is like still modern day Picard inside the younger actor, because when he interacts with Q, he'd be, acting just like older Picard would act. And I don't know, it would require less suspension of disbelief, and it would sort of visually make more sense that we could actually see what the other characters are seeing, rather than, Patrick Stewart having to have more screen time. But I don't know. So I want to ask both of you what you thought of that.
Absolutely not. Hell no. You don't put Patrick Stewart out of a Captain Picard episode. Are you crazy? No. No. But I guess part of it was that I was, at this point, I had been conditioned for this kind of thing from watching so many episodes of Quantum Leap. Same exact concept, where we had to see Scott Bakula be a woman, be a mentally handicapped person, and African Americans, and all these different people, and all the characters around him are treating him that way. But we, the audience, see Scott Bakula. So I guess I was used to that. So And I think in the other way, if you put in a young actor who is acting like older Picard, which we did need to see, this Picard would still be acting like 50 whatever something year old Picard. So putting a younger actor trying to make him act like 50 something Picard would not have made sense to me. Um, and then you don't yank Patrick Stewart out of a Picard episode, that would have been a disaster. So I'm a big firm hell no, no way in hell. The people who say that are absolutely crazy. um, yeah, I mean, first of all, 19, she's legal, and he's actually playing a 19-year-old himself. It's just that we, the audience, see Patrick Stewart. I know that in real life, like the older man had to kiss this 19-year-old. I get that. But it's just TV. It's not like he was kissing a 6-year-old or something. She's 19. Yeah, they're consenting adults, and he is playing a 19-year-old.
But
It's
and
fun.
the other thing is that they could have cast like a 33-year-old instead of a 19-year-old because Beverly Hills 90210 did
Yeah,
it.
but that one, but it's still the same problem. You're taking Patrick Stewart away.
No, I mean if by keeping Patrick.
I'm
if
putting
if you
the
cast
girl,
like a 33-year-old,
an
then it wouldn't
older
be as cringy.
woman. Yeah, it wouldn't be as cringy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He was playing a 19-year-old. Everyone sees him as a 19-year-old. I mean, I think there have been way worse things done in Hollywood that are really fucked up. Maybe people are Star Trek fans are just pure. I'm like, oh my God, you can't have a 55-year-old kissing a 19-year-old, even though the 55-year-old is playing a 19-year-old and he is being seen as a 19-year-old. We can't have that. No, I think that's frankly prudish, and I like, you gotta suspend disbelief. He is, and I think it just would not work to recast that role with and we do see the young Picard, like in the Q scenes in the beginning, we see a young actor playing Picard, so they had used that actor or another actor. I wouldn't be interested in the episode because, like, why am I? There's no Patrick Stewart playing Picard. Like, no, I say absolutely not. You have to keep Patrick Stewart in that role.
What she said. Yeah, I mean, completely. And the thing is because one of the things that makes this what it is the interaction between John Delancey and Patrick Stewart. And if you have a different actor, you're not going to have that same chemistry. And a lot of this really circles around those interactions. Plus, if you cast somebody else who's trying to play an older Picard, you're just going to be judging whether or not the kid is doing a good Picard impression. We saw that when we had the baby Picard, when he becomes a kid again, and you had to have a kid playing a younger Picard, and that worked because you had other characters around, and that was like a physical change with a mental body that totally made sense. Here again, this is all, you could say, happening effectively in Picard's mind. You know, I mean, you can paste this as a reality, as actually going back in time, as a momentary thing, as a complete confection from Q. All that kind of works. But yeah, if you replace the actor, you're just going to be judging how he is performing for what kind of Patrick Stewart impression is he doing. And I think the chemistry between the two of them, between John Delancey and him, is necessary for all this to work. Plus, you are seeing this through his mind. It does make sense that he does have to physically do this. And in regards to any cringe moment, I mean, yeah, consenting adults acting folks, I'm sorry, I know current sensibilities freak out about anybody that's more than, a couple years apart. But and in a way, honestly, I think the cringe actually works because we should be uncomfortable watching them make out. This is an older, whether or not he's in a younger body or not, it is an older Picard in his mind. And is this really the move that he should be making anyway? So I don't know. I think honestly, it actually all works much better than if you had tried to put somebody else in. and I think the Quantum Leap reference was perfect because that was the '80s, folks. We had a lot of this stuff going on.
Well, you brought up Picard as a kid. I was going to bring that up because there is an example of an episode getting rid of Patrick Stewart, and look how well that turned.
Yeah, Norman brought that up in the chat. Yeah. But, yeah.
God, that actor was absolutely terrible, though. Are you here to relieve me of duty?
Why did you make me think of it? No.
But I don't know. I'm a bit more split on it than you both are. I mean, I definitely hear where you're coming from with the Patrick Stewart. He's the best actor, and why would you get rid of him? And his chemistry with John Delancey is amazing. But I just think I would be able to get more in the mindset of some of the other characters that see him as a 19-year-old who's acting as a 50-year-old. So if you cast a good actor who was a 19-year-old who's acting like a 50-year-old, I think for me that would have sold the moment better. Where I see Patrick Stewart, it makes it hard for me to imagine what the other characters are saying.
Again, I guess it's just because I was trained on Quantum Leap that I had so many episodes of Quantum Leap, I really had no problem whatsoever of getting into the mind of the other character because I've seen it so many times on Quantum Leap and then worked there too. And so I had no problem. I would have had a problem with some strange 19-year-old actor I've never seen before, unless this would have had been like the best actor in the history of time. So,
that's it exactly.
And Darren was right. Like we would all be judging. Like, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't know whether or not this would be in your top 25. We'll get to where it was on my top 100 later, but it was in my top 25. We'll say, and you recast Patrick Stewart, I promise you it's not in my top 25. I promise you. It's nowhere near as good unless you find like the best actor ever to play that role. And that's going to have that same kind of chemistry with John Delancey. I mean, there's just no way. There's zero. If anything, if you're worried about the cringe, then your suggestion of casting an older actress to play Martha makes way more sense.
Yeah.
If you want to recast anybody, you recast her.
Well,
not Patrick Stewart.
For me, it's not really about the cringe. That's what it was for these other people I heard talking. But yeah, I as I said, I see where you're coming from. And I'm a bit split on it myself, but I wouldn't be so dismissive of it if it was a different actor, as long as they did a good job. I don't think they would need to be the best actor ever, but I think they would definitely need to do a good job. Better than that.
Patrick Stewart, yes, they do.
Better than that stupid kid who was in Rascals.
I mean, I think that's it. If they were, in the time constraints they had of putting the episode together, able to magically come across somebody that just clicked in, they may have rethought these things. But I would imagine this was specifically designed to have these two actors together. So
see, I was much younger when Quantum Leap came out, and I don't remember it as well, so maybe I just wasn't as trained on it. But anyway, let's see. Norman in the chat mentioned Sarah Laughlin and how they recast an older version of Cisco as Tony Todd played him in The Visitor. I actually think they shouldn't have. I think that they should have gotten Sarah Laughlin. I think they should have just made him old, because Tony Todd's a great actor, but he looks absolutely nothing like Jake, and it's so hard for me to imagine him as Jake. And
yeah, I mean, sure, but only if you have better old man makeup than what they did for Bashir and the.
Oh God! Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little iffy on that because Tony Todd, even though he looks nothing like Jake, is a great actor and did a great job in that role. And I'm a little iffy on Deep Space Nine's like changing up makeup because.
But I don't. He is a good actor. I just don't think he was right for the role. He doesn't. I just couldn't quite buy him as Jake.
Yeah.
I do have to say that was one thing that kind of threw me off watching that. Was just, again, great actor. I mean, in a character actor, guy's been in tons of things, so it's always, you always know he's going to give a good performance. But yeah, it was definitely like, this does not look like older Jake.
Yeah, but he's a better actor than Sarah Laughlin, though.
Yeah, true, but still.
I would not deny that. I would not
Yeah,
deny
if
that.
they, I mean, sure, I'd be okay with it if they came up with better makeup, way better makeup than they gave for Dr. Bashir and distant voices.
Or if you're gonna recast, and I think recast someone who feels more like Jake.
And then,
It's not how good or bad his acting is; it's how right he feels for the role.
it is still better than um, Bruce Willis and what the hell's that guy? Why am I blanking on that guy's name? Looper.
Yeah, Looper. Yeah, what's that guy's name? I can't.
Why am I blanking on his name? He's very famous.
Gordon-Levitt.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still better than Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing the same character. Like, no, Joseph Gordon-Levitt did not grow old and turn into Bruce Willis. No.
Yeah, they gave him that weird makeup for his nose. Oh, Darren, you're muted. All right. Let's see. I guess that's enough of that one. But anyway, that's not even what I want to. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Picard's kind of a ladies' man, apparently. And when he was, 19 or whatever in this time period. And I don't like. Again, I could buy this because people change, like they could mature, but I don't know. For me, it was kind of a hard sell that the younger version of Picard was like so, like he was like a Riker. It was like so out there and so reckless and not giving a shit. But I suppose it's kind of part of the point of the episode is that this thing taught him the lesson to be a bit and more jaded about it, and he grew older, but there's still, which is part of the reason why I think they should have cast a different actor, because it's hard for me to imagine our Picard being this reckless and being a ladies' man. But it is interesting though that he was striking out with the women as an older person, and I guess it shows how he changed and whatnot, not to be so casual. But anyway, what do you both think of the Picard being a ladies' man?
Well, I think, first of all, sticking with my guns about Patrick Stewart, I think that if you had cast a different actor and showing them being a ladies' man, I would be like, this is not Picard. I would not be able to make that connection, to draw the dots, to connect the dots there. That I would be, this is not even the same character. It's a totally different character. So I love putting Patrick Stewart in there because he's playing the older Picard who's everyone else is seeing as a 19-year-old. So he's not a ladies' man, as you see that he strikes out with all the girls, because in his older age, he's not a ladies' man anymore. So it makes sense to have Patrick Stewart there striking out. It would make no sense to have a younger actor. And if they had a younger actor and had him actually be a ladies' man, like, again, I was like, this is a different character. So having Patrick Stewart kind of makes that bridge for me. It connects the dots and makes it, okay, yeah, I can suspend disbelief and think, yeah, Picard used to be a ladies' man. So I think it was important to have Patrick Stewart. Again, I'm going to keep driving this home. But yeah, I don't know if this is something that had been mentioned before. I know, to me, I do think of it now as just like firmly in canon, but it could just be because I've seen this episode a million times, and this was like, more than 30 years ago. But I don't know if it had been mentioned before.
Yeah, so I'm going through Next Gen, and I'm up to season 4 in my rewatch, and as of yet, they haven't mentioned anything about him being a ladies' man in his younger years. So I don't think they mentioned it before.
So it could just be in this episode.
Yeah.
And then he was kind of reckless and all of that. But I do feel like they probably...
Well, they did say in that Samaritan Snare story, he did say he was reckless. He did say that. Yeah.
So the ladies' man thing is the one thing that they're adding to it. Which they probably didn't need to do, to be honest. But
actually, in Samaritan Snare, he does specifically mention that he always had to work at the ladies specifically. Wesley mentions that he had no problem with it, and it's funny because that's Picard's actual first little kind of breakdown moment. Is Wesley's like, and if don't worry about the women, I've got that totally down. And Picard's like, really? I always had to work at that.
So that would imply that he wasn't a ladies' man. Is that
Right.
something he always had to work at?
Yeah.
Sure, but he may also his problem may have been because he was young and reckless. He worked the numbers game because obviously he had two dates kind of set up for the same time. Um, and Penny was definitely a little bit of an older woman, so he didn't have so much of a type right now. I'm not sure if he was just going to whatever was interesting at that point and just willing to throw it out. On the other hand, yeah, you never really see Picard as, I don't know, a ladies guy, but whenever he's on vacation, he's like in like surf lounge wear. He's always in like the loose robes, very chesty things. So I mean, I don't know, man. There's definitely something going on with
Well,
Picard.
I
Right?
think pajamas when he goes on vacation doesn't look like pajamas to me. Anyway.
Yeah, like if you talk about Picard on vacation, like all these like hot chicks were hitting on him. He's like, "Go away! I'm trying to read." So
I have a book, damn you. That's
like,
right.
literally
At that
all-
point, then he doesn't want them, so they all come to him. See, that's again, it's the dating life. That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can. As I said, I can buy it because people change, and this event would have changed him. But I don't know. I don't think that line in Samaritan Snare counts as foreshadowing him as a ladies' man. I think this is something they just made up for this episode. But
No, I think they just wanted to show the the difference there is, yeah, ladies' man, reckless, ready to jump into a fray, and this is the incident that teaches him about mortality. Um, and maybe even valuing life in those moments because I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but as we talk about the consequence of this is being more cautious, not getting stabbed in the chest, but being stabbed in the chest and almost dying made him in some ways less cautious, or maybe just very willing to make those big choices when he needs to. But I mean, we'll jump into that later on.
yeah, so I wanted to get more into Picard having a fling with Marta, which is definitely something that didn't happen before, and wonder like if that is because Q suggested, "Oh, do you have another regret about her that she was only a friend?" Picard's like, "No, I don't regret that at all." But then he goes and sleeps with her the very next day. So was Q right? Is it something he did regret and did want to? And maybe, and also implied the fact that he was being more mature and acting more responsible than he actually did when he was 19 made him more attractive to Marta, and so that him in his 50s was actually he would be a better fit for Marta than he was like when he was younger. He wasn't a good fit at all. But was it kind of reckless of him to sleep with her, and did he do it because that is a deep-seated regret he had that he wanted to do? And it was funny because the next day he was trying to be like, "Oh, I don't regret it all," and she's like, "Yeah, I totally do though." And he's like, "Okay, well maybe we can forget about this and still be friends." She's like, "Nah, I don't think so." So it was kind of ruined his friendship with her for doing that. So it was a mistake. So maybe it's kind of a microcosm of going back and doing something differently that he always regretted and it having negative consequences. Anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't really love this storyline. I mean, I see what they were going for. They wanted to have the line where Q was like, "Oh, now you've destroyed both of your friendships." And I don't know. I think that they could have had him had a falling out with Marta in a different way, maybe more tied into the main plot. It just seemed, I don't know, weird to throw in this other regret when the main regret we're focusing on is him getting stabbed in the heart, and it just seemed to distract a little bit to kind of throw in this little side regret, and it just seemed for the purpose of this is TV and we've got to have people hook up. I just don't find, I just didn't think it was a necessary thing for them to do. I think to accomplish having Marta be mad at him or whatever, they could have done that a different way. So I gotta be honest, I never really particularly cared for this aspect of the story, but obviously doesn't ruin the whole episode or anything, but it's probably one of my lesser favorite aspects of this story.
Look, this is just what happens when you put a 50-year-old mind back into a 19-year-old's body. Certain things take over. We lose control. It's just, these things happen. These things happen. I think honestly, it is a very similar thing because, again, this is another one of those, the regrets you have really shouldn't be regrets. And this just sort of is another variation on that, as opposed to just having it the one thing, is the fact that there are certain things. Sometimes you don't sleep with a friend because that can ruin things. You don't try and stop them because maybe that ruins the friendship that you're going to have for years going forward. There's all sorts of, and I think that's part of the lesson that Q's teaching Picard in this. And maybe because it's hit, several times on the head throughout this episode, maybe this was a little bit too much, but I still think it's another one of those, like, look, man, don't focus on your regrets because you probably made the right choice. You certainly made the choice that was going to end up being the best for you. That's sort of the feel that I got onto this, because of course he messes it up when he thought, oh, maybe this could be something good I can get out of this. No, I'm still doing the wrong thing, because he's not being who he is supposed to be, who he is, really. He's being someone he thinks he wants to become later on. And again, I just think it's another way of underlining that particular message within this episode. Also, and I'll probably throw it over right now, there was one thing when his buddy comes in and they're talking, all right. Oh, I think even she does. All right, Johnny, let's get together and we'll do this thing. And all I'm thinking was, are they making a Starship Troopers reference? Which is impossible because Starship Troopers came out 4 years after this episode. Or it's another one of those weird temporal things. It's another play in of Q where they're referring to a movie that hadn't even been made yet. It's the genius of Star Trek and why we should all bow down to it. But no, it did make me think of that also just because of the dynamics between the characters. It was like, this is I don't know, maybe Starship Troopers looked back at this episode, was like, there's something we want to put into it. Change the characters' names so they all match up. Probably not, though.
No, I think you were right. They just predicted the future. That's all it was.
Yeah, that's better.
Well, I brought up the same thing in yesterday's Enterprise where they made the Archer reference before they even.
Oh yeah,
yeah, very nice. Yes. Which, of course, we're talking Quantum Leap.
Yeah,
Who stars Captain Archer? Yeah,
it's all connected.
All connected.
But anyway, it also led to one of the funniest moments in the episode where Picard wakes up in the morning and Q's lying in bed next to him. He's like, "Morning, dear." That was hilarious. I think this episode is like quite. It has a couple like pieces of dialogue that are like iconic, that are like quite memorable throughout all, the Star Trek fandom, like the John Luck Pickard thing. I've known of like so many people who were quoting that. I remember laughing hysterically when I first saw, because Q's just being all goofy, like on purpose. Like, is there a John Luck Pickard here? And the other moment is play Domjot human. Like, that is another thing I heard quoted over and over again. And in fact, like, they brought up like Jake and Nog would always play Domjot on Deep Space Nine. I think they even played with Nausicaans once, but they didn't show them. They just mentioned they were playing with Nausicaans.
And Mariner referenced that too in Lower Deck.
Oh yes, yeah.
I forget her exact line, but it was like, all Nausicaans ever do is just lose a job Domjot. Oh, actually, I think it was on Stranger Worlds episode that she.
Oh yeah.
It was live action Mariner who made that reference.
I thought that it's been a while since I've seen Lower Decks, but I thought that they actually showed her playing Domjot with the Nausicaa.
I think they did that too, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think she also referenced like how Nausicans do nothing but suck at Domjot or something. Like that's all, lose at Domjot or something like that. But yeah. Anyway.
I remember there was like a Star Trek drinking game I looked up once where you're supposed to drink, and when you're watching an episode of Star Trek, when they say something, and one of the things was whenever an alien refers to someone as human, you're supposed to like take a drink and play drink track human. Like, I don't know. So many, yeah, I've heard that line quoted back to play Dom Jot human thing.
Well, yeah, and that scene, which since you had mentioned about him waking up, that was such the great moment because he's like, he rolls over, he's again all in his Picard loungewear, and he notices, oh, immediately pulls the sheet up over his top, like, oh, I'm exposed. You've embarrassed me. No. Which is just, I mean, it's just such great small physical emotions, but it just encapsulates their relationship so nicely.
All right, since it was on the topic of actors, I want to bring up the actor who plays Corey. Is he a bad actor or is it just me? Like, I don't think he does a particularly good job. I don't know. Maybe it's just that one line where it's like, are you going to hit me, Johnny? This is like something about it seems like very like artificial. It's like, are you going to hit me? Is that just me or did anyone else get that impression?
I don't
This
think
is why we don't cast a young Jean-Luc Picard right here.
Boom. yeah, no, he was serviceable. I mean, again, yeah, I think Patrick Stewart, John Delancey carried the episode, so you can have this kind of cheesy. He wasn't the best, but I forget that a lot of times. Like it's not important. You don't even need a good actor for for that role. But yeah, I agree. He's not the best actor. He's definitely very cheesy at times. You gonna hit me, Johnny? He actually honestly reminds me of what's his name? Tom Paris. What's his name? Robert Duncan
McNeil
performance in
First Duty.
And First Duty, and
Yeah.
I think it's also like just
Actually, I thought of that too, but I think Robert Duncan McNeil did a better job though than this actor did.
Yeah.
But the other time when he was like, "Oh, you are my mother." Well, gee, mom. I'm like, I don't know. All of his acting just seemed kind of not very good.
It didn't bother me too much, but I was young at the time. I didn't know any acting.
Yeah, no. But I agree with Dan. If you had put another actor in, then you wouldn't have Patrick Stewart carrying the show the way that he did.
Yeah.
And
that's why my qualifier was it would have to be a good actor.
Yeah. You can overlook this bad actor.
But
I didn't really think about it, but you're right. He kind of sucks, but I never really think about it when I think about this episode.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't tank the episode for me. Like I barely noticed it, but it's something when I was paying like close attention to it, it's something that I noticed. But anyway, in the chat, Norman mentioned on the topic of Jean-Luc Picard, is that they actually said that earlier in the episode Times Arrow Part 2, which was actually before this one, where they had Mrs. Carmichael come in and be like, Mr. Pickard! Mr. Pickard! And this is way better than that, though. That episode, that whole sequence was annoying, like having the annoying innkeeper and them having to pretend to be actors. That was stupid. Like, Times Arrow was not very good. So this is
Look, I'm just glad that Data's head managed to stay as perfectly preserved through that entire period, so they could just put it right back on, and he's just good to go. It'd be great if there was like a little line across his neck, like what's a little darker, a little lighter for the aging. But
yeah, his head should look like all old and gnarly and shit.
So we're swerving off into other series and other episodes here.
Don't get me started on Times Arrow. Let's move on.
Yeah,
I gotta say,
okay.
I did love, and I don't know if this was what we're specifically going into the scene in the bar after Marta kind of leaves, and Picard's just sitting there talking with Q, who's just like, okay, so you've lost one friend, you lost two friends, but you've managed to avoid not being stabbed. Let's see what happens. Again, it's just I love the little poking and prodding. And also, apparently, the director thought that John Delancey should eat a giant piece of celery at the end of this scene so he'd look like more of an asshole.
Why is it that they have people eat fruit and vegetables to make them look like assholes? Like, there's something. What is it? I think CinemaSins points this out.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
so many people eat an apple. An apple's the most common thing.
It's stuck in my head, and I see it all the time now, and it's so fucking true.
I haven't used it in a book. The book that I wrote, that one of the villains is like sitting there eating an apple, being an asshole. I haven't used that because you've seen it so often. Like, there's something so perfect about it. It's like, and just being an asshole while you're eating an apple. I don't know what it is, but it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Like every time. Sometimes, again, they may substitute for celery or something else, but it is almost always an apple, and it's always to make the person look like, even bigger.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the whole Picard dodging getting stabbed in the heart. He's decided, at first he was going to report Corey for cheating, but then the Nausicaan still wanted to agitate something anyway, and Picard went as far as to shove Corey to the ground to stop it from happening. But here's, all right, well, actually, no, I'll talk about this later. It doesn't apply here. It applies more to the final scene. So, but anyway, so what do we think of this? Like, I think it played out fairly well. And it alienated his friends, like he was suggesting. He like pissed everyone off by doing it, but at least he's avoided getting stabbed through the heart. So yeah, I think this was a sort of interesting way, even before we find out what happens next, the consequence of Picard doing it. It was like a good foreshadowing way to say that, well, maybe this wasn't the best move.
Oh yeah, because he loses kind of everything in that, and it is kind of the perfect thing. He's already lost one friend, now he lost the other. Now there is a giant change that has now occurred, and I think you're right. I think it's kind of perfect that it does have that feeling of like, yeah, things don't feel too good about this, do they? Let's see what happens next.
And Darrin, you saw Samaritan Snare more recently than I have, and so have you, Mark, apparently. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Corey and Marta were made up for this episode. I don't think he ever mentioned anything about any friends being there in the original. Not that they couldn't have been, but that I don't think that they were mentioned in the original story of what happened to him.
They weren't any names, but he was there, says, with a couple of friends, and the
a couple of chums. He sounded so British when he was
saying, a couple of chums. So he's calling Marta a chum. Okay, but because I feel like this. I mean, with that original story, I didn't really get the impression that the friends had really anything to do with anything. So I do kind of love that they did make this a part of it. Even bad acting aside, and I agree, he's like, I don't know who you are. Also bad acting. But that aside, like, I think this is really effective. That really the only way to prevent himself from doing that is to turn against his friends and go so far as to push him out of the way. And he had called he was going to report him and all that stuff. Like, that's the only way to save himself, is to turn against his friends. And he mentions that he did end up being friends with him for a long time after this. And in fact, I think it was Picard season 1 or 3 where they referenced Marta, like she's a captain.
Yeah, I think it was season 1. It was definitely Rios that referenced.
Yeah, it was Rios.
He worked with her. Like, he was her first officer, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. So, and Picard remained friends with them for a long time. So I actually love that they do add that in to really raise the stakes. That not only do we have the consequences that we end up seeing with the timeline, which we'll get to, but he totally alienated his friends. That was the only way to save himself. And so that really worked for me. Bad acting aside.
My memory of Samaritan Snare is, yeah, he did say, "Oh, I was at the Starbase with some chums," but when he was telling the actual story of how he got stabbed, I was listening for, is he going to mention his friends? But he didn't. He just mentioned, as far as that story tells, Picard was the only one fighting the Nausicaans. Like,
That's what I had always gotten the impression of.
Yeah.
That, so they kind of retconned Corey and Marta into being a part of that fight, but I think it works for that reason.
Yeah. Totally.
Well,
does.
yes, but he has also changed the timeline, because in the originally he allowed him to do it, then they played another game, and then it came up, so the setup was slightly different between that final fight, how it happened way back then and how it happened in this, we'll say, altered timeline.
Well, in the original timeline too, though, I think Corey and Marta would have been, or at least Corey would have been fighting. They wouldn't have just stood there and watched Picard fight by himself. So they would definitely would have been.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. No. But no, he's actually, I mean, the one thing is I think I remember the fight description was pretty quick, because he was like, yeah, and then a day later we ran back into them, and he said something about, I may have mentioned something about his parent, questionable parentage.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to bring up, because I remember watching Samaritan Snare, and he said, "Oh, I might have questioned his parentage." He didn't do that in this episode.
No,
I was like, "Why isn't Picard doing that?" Like, not in this scene, but at the other scene at the end when Q takes him back, and he's like, "What did you say?" Like, you're supposed to question his parentage.
So I mean, but that's what I'm saying. I think there's a slight variation of how the fight was all set up. Though he does mention that, I was doing quite well actually for a minute there, till one of them stabbed me through the back.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was doing pretty well in the fight. No, we haven't gotten to that.
But I also thought, like, the point in Samaritan Snare is that he took on 3 Narsicans by himself.
Yeah, I think that was implied.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm fine with them.
But anyways, my point was that the retcon works.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's get to the alternate timeline. I remember when I first saw this episode, I was like, got chills, and I was like, oh fuck, they're actually showing like an alternate timeline. And this is interesting because when Q first took Picard back in time and was like, here, you can change your future. And Picard's like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'll alter the timeline, blah, 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 blah. And Q gets all pissed off and throws everything down. And it's like, fine, I guarantee you nothing's going to change except for you. But so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, by the simple act of Picard not being a captain his whole life, wouldn't that change the timeline? Kind of like in Strange New Worlds when Pike remained captain, that changed the whole timeline. But maybe since this Q gave his guarantees that nothing would change, maybe he used his Q magic to make sure everything stayed the same. But it seems to me that naturally, like, maybe shit would be a lot worse. Maybe like the Borg would have defeated the Federation or something. Maybe shit would be a lot worse if Picard was never the captain the whole time.
Oh, Riker killed his previous captain. Yeah, the moment he became with Clujas, he took them all out, didn't bother going back in. They didn't have that connection, So,
well, in this alternate timeline, Riker's not the captain. There's a like Hathaway or something that we never see on the screen that was mentioned as the captain.
Yeah, well, again, everybody else is pretty much exactly where they're supposed to be. It's like that genie thing, it's the monkey paw wish. It's like, yeah, everything's the same except you and your whole life.
I don't
add that part in.
I don't buy that at all. Like, I agree. Like, we saw what happened with Pike. I think there's no way that Hathaway or whoever would do the exact same thing Picard did all through those 7 years. And this is why, and we've gotten into this argument before, I choose to not interpret this as time travel because they never really say what happened here. The other possibilities are this was just a Q and whole Q invented thing. We saw him do this in Cupid. We've seen him like just invent worlds. So that he didn't actually go back in time. That Q was just inventing this imaginary world like he did in Cupid and all those other Q episodes where he does that. He has the power to do that. Or at the end, Picard was like, well, if this is Q, so they're still leaving open the possibility that it was all in his head. They don't, so it's just kind of about interpretation, how you interpret it. I think most people interpret it straight up as it was time travel. I prefer to interpret it not as time travel because of that, and because of it really bugs me that he would have changed the timeline to now where he did have sex with Marta. Like that's still there, that's still there, and that he did have a falling out with his friends and was acting weird and acting like a 55-year-old for a while. Like that's still in the timeline if you interpret this as time travel, and that bugs me. So this is one of the reasons why I choose to go with the interpretation that this is just something that Q created, or possibly that this is all in Picard's head, because they do leave that open as a possibility. Although I don't like that one because I like it being really Q. So I choose the one where that was really Q, but it's something Q invented it rather than real time travel, because then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You don't have to worry about, like, wouldn't that change the timeline? Because it would. It would have changed the timeline to have a different captain there. So that's how I choose to kind of
I think there's actually evidence to support that point of view in the following scene with Riker and Troy, because they know too much about him for him to be this nondescript little corner schmiggly science officer. Isn't this always been your problem? Never willing to do these things? You know, it was like, so no, I think this is, all of it is a world.
I think you underestimate Riker and Troy. They're good at their job.
I don't think they would know that much detail about every little junior grade science officer. Like, I mean, impossible. There's like 1,000 people on that ship. They wouldn't know. There's no way.
I totally disagree. That's yes, they could. They've been shown of now, like in the episode Lower Decks, they knew all about those specific instances. It's been precedent for this. They're good at their jobs. But anyway, since we're getting into this, I am very much an interpretation that it is time travel. Now, I don't know if you saw my announcement video, but I said how we had to reschedule this, and Norman said, "You see, Alyssa's wrong. This is proof that it was time travel because we're changing the schedule.
We had to go back and fix the show."
No, but I actually look at this more along the same lines as All Good Things, because in All Good Things, I think they're both very similar, in fact, because there's a situation where Picard's time traveling and no one else experiences it except Picard. So at the end, everyone has to take Picard's word for it that Q went back and traveled and made Picard travel back in time. And also in All Good Things, he changed the past. He was talking, to Worf during when he meant to say Tasha, and he's called for a red alert. No one remembers that happening in the present. So it's kind of implied that Q sort of changed the timeline back to its original thing, which I don't know why you couldn't just take the same thing here. That Q changed it so that when Picard went back in time and stabbed the Nausicaan, he fixed everything so that everything went back to the normal timeline.
Well, I don't
just like it did in All Good Things.
In All Good Things, I don't think that Q went back and fixed it, because as it was happening, as Picard was going back and changing things, nobody remembered it. So they said, "Oh, the timelines are disconnected." So it's almost like it's more of a Star Trek 2009 thing, where it's like this other created this other universe that doesn't connect to theirs. That's more how I saw it, because it's not something Q went back and fixed later, because it was in real time. They didn't remember what happened. So that's kind of how I saw All Good Things.
Well, whatever logic you apply to All Good Things could also apply here.
That is, he created some alternate timeline that like a Star Trek 2009.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose
because he did do something weird with the time, because people in the present didn't remember shit from the past. So it could have been the same thing here, where if you contacted Marta, she would have been like, "We never had an affair. This never happened." But that doesn't mean that he didn't travel back in time.
Yeah, but it's
could
much
say
simpler
that he
just to
was.
say Q created it like he does a lot of other times. Like, yeah, I don't know why we have to be insistent this must be time travel. Like, why does it have to be time travel?
I mean, it doesn't have to be. You're right, but to me, like the same thing that applies to this episode applies for All Good Things. So I wouldn't understand why someone would say All Good Things is definitely time travel, and this episode definitely isn't. Because to me, they're pretty similar.
I say it's all parallel universes. He was mentally projecting Picard's consciousness into another alternate Picard from a parallel but not perfect universe, which he can meld and then travel forward. Who knows? It's Q's powers. It could all be in his mind. He could be involving multiple realities.
Because in All Good Things, the whole point of it was that it was time travel. Like, the whole point of the whole episode was that it was time travel. Whereas here, it doesn't have to be time travel. The whole point is just to teach Picard a lesson. Whereas All Good Things, it doesn't work if it's not time travel, because then that whole time phenomenon
it could be the same thing. It could be the same thing, that all that anomaly stuff didn't actually happen in the timeline. It could have just been the Q creating a Cupid thing as well. It could have been the same situation. Maybe the universe never really was that threat. It was all going on in Picard's head. I think it's two of the same situations.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but I feel that this episode intentionally leaves it up for interpretation, with the line at the end where Picard is like, well, I don't know if it was Q, but if it was, he was being really compassionate, like, instead of just like straight up saying it was Q. So they intentionally leave the interpretation, whereas All Good Things is meant to be straightforward. They don't want interpretation.
I do agree with you there. That is the difference between this episode and All Good Things, is that Picard himself was certain it actually happened in All Good Things. In this episode, he wasn't so sure. So that is the one difference.
And I think that's where we, the audience, need to be, is with Picard.
Well,
it's one for interpretation and one is not.
I'm not going to put Q in a box. I'm going to put Q in a corner. I think he can do whatever he wants. Maybe it's in his mind. Maybe it isn't. He's a freaking god. He does whatever he wants. Maybe he's got different.
Well, I agree with you, Darren. I think any of these situations could apply to any of them. And ultimately, with Tapestry, I could say, yeah, ultimately, it's very clear that the episode wanted it to be up to interpretation, whether or not you believed it was time travel or not. And for you, you think you're more comfortable with it if you believe it wasn't time travel. But for me, I like it better. To me, it's a lot more interesting if it was time travel.
Sure.
I just got to reply to Norman real quick. Little sidestep. If only Picard season 2 was like that, where it was all in his head. I wish season 2 was not in my head. Like, how is Robert to be taken out of my head? But anyway, sorry. I just had to soul that and had to respond.
Though I would say, whether it's time travel in his head or not, I do believe Alyssa's right, whereas if Picard called Mardo right now, they would never have slept together.
No, I said that because I think that.
Yeah.
But I still think it's time travel.
Sure. But I think, ultimately everything was fixed. That the purpose of this was not to change or mess with time, but simply for Picard to see that his regrets shouldn't be regrets.
Right, exactly. So it doesn't have to be time travel. But anyway.
But I think it's the same with All Good Things. That was also to open Picard's mind, to teach him a lesson. And he's the only one that remembers the events.
Oh, we're just going to go in circles.
No one else remembers.
But All Good Things was not left for interpretation, and this one is. That's the big difference.
No, I disagree. I think they're both open for it.
It's all in the holodeck, folks. It's all in the holodeck.
Because, as you said, Picard believed firmly that he was really time traveling in the other, and I think that we were to believe Picard as the audience. So we were to take that at face value, whereas here was intentionally up for interpretations. Two different things, not comparable.
No, I think it's the same thing, but you're right. Let's move on. We're getting stuck in the feedback loop. So what's next? Oh yeah, we can talk more about Picard being in this alternate reality where he believes that he's a lieutenant junior grade and that he's a miserable existence, and so the whole point is if he would have like changed the thing that he would regret, it would have negatively affected his life. And we see him in this dreary existence. He's like really pissed off. He's like yelling at Q, "Are you happy now? Are you happy to see me like this?" And then sort of Q reappears and be like, "But this is what you wanted." Like, and I think this is what makes this episode so great. It really sells that, oh, well, you want to change this about you? Well, go right ahead, but it's going to really fuck up. Like, if you never did those things, then your life actually could have been a lot worse. Anyway, Darren.
Yes.
I was waiting for you to tell us.
Yeah, I know. I was sorry, I was waiting for a different lead-in, I guess. No. I think this was again all very perfect, and you could see his kind of discomfort. It was kind of perfect. He had that. They did give that moment where after the senior officers leave, which he's no longer is one. He's just sitting in 10 forward, like, all right, Q. All right, we can change this now, right? We can change this. It's just like hope at any minute. And I think that he does give a good moment afterwards, walking into the hallway, like, fuck, am I going to have to just keep doing this? Is this my life now? I think there's kind of that great moment of that before Q then opens up the turbolift doors and, does his little, tons of people would have liked to have done this. You see all these things that I have done for you, and now you want me to change it all back? I think it's perfect, and it really does, again, put that kind of nail on the head that of what the episode is about those regrets and things. Even Picard, saying, I'd rather die the man I was than live this miserable life. It's like, okay, so you don't really regret anything. It's a perfect stuff. And I love the fact that he doesn't just change it, that he does have to make the choice to actually go get stabbed again and actually do the fight, as opposed to just be like, which I think A Wonderful Life would have ended it right there with like, I want to go back, Q. I want to go back. And then he wakes up there. Beverly, I'm alive. You were there and you were there. You Tin Man. And I mean, Data, sorry.
I thought you sounded like Jack from Lost. Eh?
I was going all over the place there.
We have to go back.
But yeah, I think that's kind of I do like that again, where it's like he really does have to go and embrace that mistake to do it again, to die in order to ultimately live, which I think was just beautifully done.
Yeah, and kind of like Mark said, this is what makes this episode great. This is, aside from all the great chemistry between John Delancey and Patrick Stewart and all of that and all the other stuff that we talked about, I think this is really what ties it all together. And it's just like, boom, this is the point. And it's a really, I think it's something that, I mean, when I watched this, I was probably like, what was this, 93 when this came out? So I was probably like 18, 19. So I hadn't gotten to the point of my life yet where I really had regrets like this. But I always kept this episode in mind, like moving forward in my life. Anytime like I was like, oh man, I just fucked that up. And shit, I'm like, well, maybe this is a Tapestry situation where like now it's just up to me to like learn from that. And I think that's just such a powerful point. Just such a powerful message is that we all have regrets, but what did we do with those regrets? Picard learned from that mistake and molded himself into the great captain that he became. And if he hadn't had that mistake to learn from, he never would have become that captain. So I think this is so powerful. This is why this episode is so great for me, as when that moment where they just tie it all together here at the end.
Yeah. So next we get the scene of Picard actually going back in time and being like, you have no grandma. And it's like, you are a coward. And I was like, what'd you say? oh, that's what I thought you said. And then like kicking his ass and doing everything that leads to him being stabbed, and him sort of liking it, being because realizing that this is always that was meant to happen. Now, what's interesting is that he believes that he's going to die. That by doing this, by making things happen the way that they did originally, that he's going to die on the table. His artificial heart is going to kill them, and miraculously, that didn't happen. Now, if you believe that this is Q, that Q was actually involved, was he lying? When Q said, "Oh, you died," he just wanted to fuck with him. It could have been that, or it could have been, well, he was never going to die in the first place. It was just a dream that he had. But either way, I think, yeah, I think that's interesting that he didn't. I mean, maybe a bit of a narrative cheat that automatically he didn't die, because the consequence for him going back and doing this is supposed to be him dying. But of course, we need to have Captain Picard on the show, so they can't do that. So it seems like the consequence was kind of fake, that he didn't actually die, but it still works because it's still, he learned the actual lesson. He was so thankful to Q, and having that scene with him talking to Riker at the end saying, if that is Q, I really need to thank him. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't mention that, like when Picard sells Q and all good things, he should have been like, hey, so you remember that time when I went back in, was that actually you or was I just dreaming? But I think Q kind of wouldn't give him a straight answer, would just fuck with him either way. But anyway, but no, that was a good sort of ending where Picard, even though Q was like Riker said, it sounds like he put you through hell, but Picard is just like, no, I gotta thank the hell out of him because I have a totally different outlook on life now. So yeah, so your whole thoughts on, was it a narrative cheat that he didn't actually die and everything was fine?
I thought it was Q just fucking with him. Like, I think to raise the stakes, to make Picard believe that either you die on the operating table or you go back and change it and you live. Like, to really raise the stakes and really make him want to go back and change it even more. So I think he lied. Like, I don't. I don't think that. So I don't see it as a narrative cheat, because I can just easily explain it away by saying, well, Q did that intentionally to raise the stakes for Picard so that he would be more likely to choose to go and change things because he knows he's going to die if he doesn't. So I think that, yeah, I think it was Q fucking with him. I don't think that was true. So I don't see it as a narrative cheat.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think Q is the definition of an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
So no, because I don't think that any of this was about Picard living or dying in the future. It wasn't about that. It was about the opportunity to deal with this possibility. If this is what killed you, was your greatest regret, then having this heart or that? Again, it's a what if, effectively. I mean, I think Q would potentially cure and make Picard better and so on, just as, payment for the entertainment and the lesson and so on like that. But no, my always feeling was always very much like, this is Picard, or this is Q messing with Picard because he has the opportunity to do so. Though he actually uses the opportunity not to mess with him, but actually teach him something important. I do love the fact that they use the exact same choreography that they show from when he first had the fight to the end there, and the moves, or at least all of the main moves, were all identical and such, which is something I did kind of appreciate. Like, again, he's back in time, he's back in the groove, he's doing young Picard. And I got to come in. I was going to say this before I saw your comment, Norman, but I kind of have to. I don't know if I agree that it was always that way, but I do really kind of appreciate that idea of him laughing, because, again, he's laughing at his own death now, of like, ha, I did it. It's done. Isn't this, just kind of laughing at the universe and his place in it in that moment, which is, again, why he's, they go to the future and he's laying on the table laughing, like he's having the dream or whatever. I don't necessarily believe that it was always why he did, but it does give an interesting point, which I won't entirely take away, because again, in the story, he does talk about feeling giddy, the warmth, giddiness. In fact, I even laughed. Though I think what Norman is saying, and is kind of an interesting idea, is that was the blend of his old consciousness and his older consciousness, seeing and reliving that moment, and the laugh again. The giddiness that he felt was laughing at the universe and the way everything all sort of works itself out. Um, so
Yeah, I don't think it was Q all along, but I think it's interesting. I think that the second time around, when he went back and changed things back to how they were supposed to be, that changed the nature of the laugh.
yeah,
That originally he just laughed because it felt weird, but this time he laughed at the irony of it all, and why it's, as you said, it's how he continues to laugh even when he wakes up in sick bay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's no scenario in which it was always the laugh, because then talk about screwy time travel logic. That really makes my head hurt to even think of that possibility. So there's no way to me that it was always a laugh, but I do like that interpretation that it changes the nature of the laugh. I do like that.
yeah. And then of course that whole little scene between Riker and Picard to sort of clean everything up, I thought was beautifully done. And Picard's even in his like little jacket and stuff outfit there. He looks a little bit more relaxed. He's talking. He's, again, you can see that certain joie de vivre, if we want to go into Picard's language here, of life, and his appreciation for what Q does, and the fact that it even leads into another sort of, well, that's not the only time I ran into a surly Nausicaan. And yeah, surly Nausicaan, that's the line in my head. There's a surly Nausicaan.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think one of the Michael Westmore, one of the makeup costume designers, admitted to sort of emulating the Predator for the Nausicaan design. I think so, if I'm not too mistaken.
Yeah, they don't look as much like the Predators though as the dudes from the Voyager episode Nemesis.
The Nemesis Voyager episode, yeah. Yeah.
I know it's straight up the Predator.
But it was interesting, Darren, you mentioned that story that Picard was telling, and it's funny because universally I've heard like the same reaction to that, because Picard's like, oh, that wasn't the first run-in ahead with the Nausicans. We're stationed at blah blah blah, and then one day, and it cuts the credits, and everyone's like, no, don't cut the credits, I want to hear the story.
They gotta leave you wanting more, man. That's they're doing their job right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was great. And again, I just that little last final line when he talks about, and it's, I put it in all my ads and my Twitter feeds and my Facebook posts, is, I had all of these loose threads. I had these loose ends in my past, and then when I pulled on these threads, I unraveled the tapestry of my life. It's such a beautiful, simple way of kind of bringing that all together and showing the importance of all of the parts of our lives. And again, that line has stuck with me, since 93, what, 30 years now. My God, I'm old. Oh.
Well, as I said, I never saw It's a Wonderful Life, but I am certain from everything I know about it that it's a piece of shit compared to this episode. I'm sorry. That's my hot take.
It's a little saccharine. It's overly done. It's been parodied and referenced so much. Is that, yeah? I think that's look. You want to know why Wonderful Life was shown all the time? Because it had you didn't have to pay any fees for the residuals and stuff.
Okay.
Licensing fees were almost nothing. So any television station across America could easily afford It's a Wonderful Life, because it flopped when it went out in theaters.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. It's
considered a classic nowadays.
Yeah, it's only become a classic because everybody was forced to watch it every holiday season for 50 years.
That Charlie, remember Saturday Night Live had this skit where there's the lost ending where they went and killed one of the grumpy men or something, and
Yeah.
They did like a mob thing and like pushed them or something. Anyway, I was gonna mention the Nausicaans because this was the first time we saw the Nausicaans. They were mentioned in Samaritan Snare. Was the first time they were mentioned. This is the first time we saw them, and then they made several more appearances, background characters in a Deep Space Nine. There were even an episode of Enterprise, which was weird, and of course they showed up in Lower Decks as mentioned, and were mentioned in Strange New Worlds. So that's interesting. They became a running thing just from this episode.
Well, they get those weird face things, It just once you get a good looking mask like that, Nausicaan, it just sounds like you're about to start a fight when you say their name, Nausicaan.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into where you would have this on your own personal countdown. Would it be higher, lower, or around the same? And since I already know Alyssa's answer, we'll start with Darrin. Where would you have this?
I think you've got this in a great spot. I think I'd probably be around the same things. Again, it's definitely one of my top episodes. When you're dealing with 4 extensive series, it's hard to see what's going to be in the top 5 or even the top 10. But I would definitely say this is probably around the area that I would put it. Maybe slightly higher, again, just because it has certain memory things. But I think, again, it's one of those episodes where the sum of it's greater than the sum of its parts. The basic story, the interactions, all the little things are nice, but just really how all of that comes together. Plus, we're referring to an older episode, and we have great performances. It's just, I think it plays itself out really well. So yeah, right around here, maybe slightly higher. It depends on what other episodes we've got to cover in the rest of your list here.
All right.
Well, yeah, you know where it is on mine. I did my top 100 last year, and this came in. This is actually the closest so far that you've gotten to my top 25. Whereas I had this at number 15, so just slightly behind this. 15 just felt like a really good spot for me, but it's only two off. And this is the closest we've gotten to each other so far, although Marcus hinted that there's one coming up that's a little closer even, but this is the closest that our 2 top 25s have kind of come to each other, as I had this at 15 and Mark had it at 13, so very close.
I mentioned before, I don't know if you were here, Alyssa, but I mentioned in a different video that I would have swapped, if I had my 25 to do over again, I would have swapped my number 16 and my number 13 so that Yesterday's Enterprise would be 13 and Tapestry would be 16. But that's, I already did it. It's already set in stone. But that's, that's maybe a change I would make. Maybe
yeah, but I thought that Yesterday's Enterprise would have been higher on my list too. So these may have been a little bit closer together. I think Yesterday's Enterprise is a little better than this episode.
Well, Yesterday's Enterprise was number 2 for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
the second best episode in the entire franchise. So yeah, I agree. This is Yesterday's Enterprise is better than this.
Well, actually, maybe I would have Yesterday's Enterprise as number 12, and my number 12 would be 13, and this would be 16. But anyway, I'm not changing anything.
Stuck in digital stone now. You've already got the thumbnails are made up. We're not changing anything.
It's in stone now.
I wrote on my top 100, and as I was going through, I was doing 1 month at a time. I was doing 25 episodes, and as I was going through it, I would be like, I could have moved this here before I made my video, because I think I mentioned this when we reviewed Timeless, the Voyager episode, that I rewatched it before I put it in my did my top I think it's in the top 50 video for that. And then I rewatched it and I was like, actually, I would have moved this up. So I did definitely move things around, but once its video has been recorded, you can't. It's too late. but I did it before the videos were recorded.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You don't have time to watch all 100 episodes first and be like, oh, so this is where. So it's not like just fresh in your mind, because after you rewatch something, you're like, oh, actually, maybe I should have had this higher or lower. I think the only time I ever did that when I did my BoJack Horseman top 25, I actually did watch it first before I did the video. So I did switch things around. But those episodes are like 30 minutes, so it's easier to do that.
It's a little different. You have to spend like a week straight.
Yeah.
I don't need sleep.
Yes, Norman mentioned before yesterday's Enterprise is his number one, so I already blew his number one, but that's all good. All right, so let's go ahead and end things here. I think it was just Norman in the chat at the moment, but we did have a few visitors. Jay came in 99. I know Brandon stepped in at the top of the video, and Tyler. So thank you for everyone who dropped in, and anyone who's watching this who didn't comment, or anyone watching this in the archives. Thank you so much for checking this out. And of course, big thanks to my guests for coming in to talk about this amazing episode. Alyssa, if you just want to give a shout out to having anything going on, or where people can find you, or maybe some older videos.
Yeah, I mean, you can go check out Alyssa Jean's reviews. I'm not currently doing anything on the channel anymore, except I did do a live chat like a week ago. Which, Norman, you weren't there. You were like, everybody was there except Norman. Like, it was, I was just so impressed with how many people showed up for it. Like, Liz showed up and Allison Fordyce. And I was like, but where's Norman Buchwald? But hopefully Norman will be at the next one, which I'll probably do in June. I will also definitely do something for Discovery, I think. And maybe some other things in the future. I'm kind of intrigued by Acolyte. Maybe I'll do a video on that. But I think for the most part, you got to go back and look at the stuff I previously did, which tons and tons of stuff on Star Trek. And I did my entire top 100 and so much more. So you go back and watch all the stuff that I have done on my channel.
All right, and Darrin, where can people find you?
Here a lot. Not a whole lot of activity on my channel right now, though. If you're pirate fans, I believe Black Sails is coming to Netflix shortly, and I do have a couple of seasons of reviews on my channel there. Highly recommend that. Really good show. Was originally on Stars, I think, but it's coming to Netflix now. But mostly I am looking forward to the Acolyte. I wasn't really sure what to expect on that. I actually really enjoyed the preview for it. I'm curious about the storytelling they're going to do. So as we get closer, I might have a little bit more to talk about that. Otherwise, lately you can pretty much find me either here or occasionally over at Smirking Reviews with Rob Stone, who we did a little thing on the return of Rick and Michonne to the Walking Dead universe a couple of weeks ago, and that was a fun little discussion. But otherwise, just kind of floating in the wind right now, but always appreciating to come over here and talk more Star Trek. I've actually been rewatching some of Discovery and realizing why I don't watch it much. But I'm, look, I think Anson Mount as Pike is awesome, so I'm willing, and I love Ethan Peck as Spock, so I'm enjoying season 2 as I wait for Strange New Worlds to come eventually. But the last season of Discovery should be fun. I hope they end with a bang. And less talking.
There is no way I'm ever going to check out any of the future Walking Dead stuff. I gave up in that hole. It was a long time ago. I'm surprised I ever got into it. It's just repeating the same beats over and over again, and I'm sure that hasn't changed. I'm positive that hasn't changed.
That was part of our discussion.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
I thought so. But anyway, I don't know if you remember, Darrin, Black Sails is how we first met, because I was looking for someone to do a Black Sails discussion with me because no one I knew did. And then I found your channel. I was like, hey, maybe you can do it.
That's right. I remember. And then we started doing Game of Thrones after that, which is what I really remember doing a lot of with. So, yeah, that's awesome. yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've been needing some new content to just watch at home, and I'm happy to dive back into that series.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it too. Anyway, if you're finding me for the first time, my name's Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity at the moment, counting down my top 25 favorite episodes of the Star Trek franchise, one each month with a live stream. And I'm also going through every Star Trek episode, reviewing them all. At the moment, doing Star Trek Next Generation. I'm up to season 4 now, into the good seasons finally, and we'll be covering Discovery when that comes out as well. So yeah, be sure to check out my channel, subscribe, and also check out Alyssa Jean reviews and Dee's reviews, and subscribe if you haven't to them as well. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Caramba.